That's averaging one piece of artwork every 15 days. Now, you may be thinking it was like in the movies, right? Where, somebody's crawling down a air duct and they rappel down from the ceiling and then they get through all the lasers and grab the painting and run off. And it wasn't anything like that. Stefan Brottweiser stole art by walking into museums, having his girlfriend get on the corner and look out and see if anybody was coming, and cutting the paintings out of the frames and stuffing them down his shirt. He did this numerous times at various museums throughout Europe as he stole artwork after artwork. How? Well, simply, he wasn't stealing it to sell. So he wasn't concerned about the value of the artwork. He just stole what he liked. When he saw a piece of artwork he liked, he stole it. And so several times he would be in museums, and they would not be the paintings that you would expect somebody to be after, these priceless works of art, these famous works of art, yet still they were works of art. He would see them, he would cut them out, and he would take them. And he did this for years. In fact, he was only caught because he went back a few days later to a museum he had just stolen something from. And as circumstances worked out, the guard that was there that day recognized him again and captured him. How could museums let all this artwork go? Well, they just didn't think it was that important to protect. They knew the paintings were there, but they didn't expect anyone would risk being arrested for taking such what they deemed as simple artwork. That's the way a lot of people are with sin. As long as it's not so bad, as long as it's not so big, it's not any trouble. Little temptation isn't worrisome as long as we don't fall for the big stuff. When we think about temptation, when we think about sin, we usually think about it as long as I'm not doing those big things, it's something I don't have to concern myself much with. In Luke chapter 21, Jesus is speaking to his disciples about the destruction of the temple. Now, this chapter is very similar to Matthew chapter 24, where Jesus is once again having the same discussion. But in Matthew chapter 24, Matthew has to deal with the fact that for his apostles and for most of the Jews of that day, they assumed that the end of the world would come when the temple was destroyed. They were linked together. And Jesus has to tell them, no, that's not the same thing. My return, when I come back to judgment of the world and the destruction of the temple, are two separate events. And Matthew 24 has to deal with both of those. But luckily for us, Luke simplifies it down to just talking about the destruction of the temple. And we can know that because in verses 29 through 31, he gives the parable of the fig tree. He says, the fig tree, you see when it's coming, right? You see the leaves, you know the time of the year it is, and you know what's going to happen. You see these things happening, you recognize that the kingdom is near. And anytime Jesus talks about his return, he doesn't talk about it in a series of events that we'll be able to see coming. He always says it will come like the thief in the night. The parable that he uses there is the thief in the night. He comes when we're least expecting it, when we're not ready for it. As opposed to this event where he says, if you watch, you'll see it coming. We also see that in the next verse, in verse 32, when he says, truly I tell you, there are some standing here who will not taste death before this takes place. There would be people who would be alive that would have heard this message when the temple was destroyed in AD 70. And so Jesus is warning them about this event, and a warning that is glad that they listened to, because those Christians who heeded the warning and listened and saw the signs were able to escape Jerusalem and not be caught up in the destruction. And historically, we know that Christians were spared at a far greater rate than Jews because they had this warning and they heeded it and it took place. But I really don't want to focus on that part of the event. I would rather focus on the last warning that Jesus gives. And it's what we read earlier in our scripture reading in Luke 21 in verses 33 through 36, where he tells us to be on guard. He finishes that statement by saying, so that you will know what will take place, you have the strength to escape the things that are about to take place. But he also says, and to stand before the Son of Man. While this warning was given to these people at this time, it's a warning that also we can gain wisdom from as well. That we can get an understanding for, because we may not face that event like they did, but we will face like they would face, standing before the Son of Man. Because 2 Corinthians chapter 5:10 tells us that we must all appear before the judgment seat. That we will all give an account of what we have done, whether good or bad. See, all of us need to be careful, because all of us will face a judgment where God will look at what we have done. Not just the good things that we want to show, but the bad things that we didn't do, we did do. And we're all going to face that judgment. So we need to heed this warning that he gives us. What is that warning? To keep alert at all times. To pay attention. To make sure we're watching out. Lest what? It will come upon us like a trap. It will come on us because we're not aware and we're not looking forward. You know, we won't know when he will come back. But we will know what we are doing when he comes back, because we know what we do. We need to have ourselves ready. You know, later Jesus would give this same warning to his disciples when he says, "But keep watching and praying that you do not come into temptation, for the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." As they sat in that garden and Jesus asked them to pray for them, they couldn't do it. They couldn't stay awake long enough. And Jesus says, you need to watch out. You need to keep praying. Why? Because your spirit is willing. You want to, but the flesh is weak. You don't do. We know we should, but we allow ourselves to fall into it. See, we need to be alert. Peter says in 1 Peter 5:8, be sober of spirit, be on alert. Why? Because your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone he may devour. Be on alert. Why? Because the temptation is out there. Because the devil is sowing that seed. Because he's like a roaring lion. A lion does not come upon its prey, even though it's the big bad king of the jungle. It does not walk up and say, I'm going to take you on. It lurks, it hides. It waits till we're not watching. And it jumps on us. The lions look at someone and if they don't see their eyes, they attack them. That's why there are some who live in those countries have taken to wearing masks that have faces on the back of them. So it looks like they're looking and the lion won't jump them because they think it's watching. He says be on alert because the devil is like that lion and he's seeking someone who devour. It's the ones that you're not thinking about that get you. Why protect the little paintings, right? Who's going to go after this little piece of art when there's something worth millions of dollars there? Oh, sure, it's worth something, but it's not near as worth as this. That's where we'll put the guard. That's where we'll put the lasers. That's where we'll put the protection. But then it makes it open and available for someone to come in and just take this thing of value. Are we living our lives in the same way that we're watching out for things, forgetting about others, those little subtle temptations that can drag us away? If you want a homework assignment, go through your Gospels and look at how many times Jesus uses the phrase, be on alert, watch out, be on guard. And you're going to notice something because he uses it over and over, but it's not always for things that we might be expecting. Be on guard against the leaven of the yeast, the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees, he tells his disciples. What's he talking about there? He's talking about be on guard against that form of thinking. Be on guard against every form of greed. Why are we worried about that? Over and over you're going to see him say, watch out for these things that may not be the things that we think of as being, oh, that's what's going to get us. But rather he's telling us to watch out for these subtle things. Watch out for these little things. We may not think it's such a, oh, what's greed? It can be the very thing that brings us to destruction. Why? Because we're not watching out. Go back to Luke 21. It says, be careful, watch out. Why? He said, be careful so that your hearts will not be weighed down with dissipation, drunkenness, and the worries of life. Here he gives us three ideas. Three different ways. And I think we really have to get down into it to understand what these phrases mean. You know, that first one, dissipation, is how the New American Standard translates it. I think the King James actually does the best job translating this word, except they use a word that's very ancient that nobody knows what it means before. It uses the word surfeiting. It's not something we use in our common language, but what does surfeiting mean? It means to have no more desire for something as the result of consuming it or having done it to excess. That word means it's when you eat way too much and you look at something and you think, I don't ever want to see that again in my life, right? When someone drinks way too much and they wake up the next morning and they're hungover and they have a headache and they say, I never want to do that again. That's the first term he uses. And it's different, though it's linked to the next one. Drunkenness, right? Dissipation and drunkenness. The word here literally means an intoxicant, to be intoxicated, to take of a substance that alters your brain. The third one that he uses is translated in the New American Standard, the worries of life. Literally, in the original language, it means life distractions. The things in life that distract you. What is Jesus telling his disciples to watch out for? What is he warning people before this destruction comes? He says, watch out for the pains, the pleasures, the pressures. All these things do what? They take your attention off something. We've all done that before, right? My head's hurting too bad, I just can't think about that right now. I'm too caught up in something or intoxicated by something, so I'm not thinking about anything else. I've just got too much on me, so much going on in life. I've got so many things to take care of, I don't have time for that. But Jesus says, watch out for these things. Why? Because they will cause you to miss the very thing that's going to bring you into destruction. You're not paying attention. And the thief comes and he takes it away. We're distracted. We're busy with something else. We're chasing after something else. We're allowing our actions to ruin us so that when the temptation comes, we're not aware of it. But we better pay attention, because the thing we're not paying attention to might just be our ruin. Jesus tells us in Matthew chapter 12, verse 36, but I tell you that every careless word that people speak, they shall give an accounting for it on the day of judgment. We think about a lot of things we should be worried about, but we always don't think about what we say to people, what we let slip. But we better watch out, because we're going to be judged for it. We may not think of the little things that we succumb to and say, well, that's not that important, that's not that big a deal. But we better watch out, because it might be the thing that is leading us further and further away from God. Why does Jesus give these warnings? Watch out for these things, watch out for these things. Because I'm afraid that so many times we're considering that it's all the big things, right, that we have to watch out for. But it's the little things, the subtle temptations that we don't account for, that we don't watch out for, that we're not prepared for. And it's the very things that are bringing us to ruin. James would say in James 2:10, for whoever keeps the whole law yet stumbles in one point, he has become guilty of all. Here he's talking about those that thinking their righteousness came from the old law. They were so concerned about that they've missed the truly important things. Straining at the gnat and swallowing the camel. Maybe it's the reverse. You know what the worst part about the great art thief was? He's also the greatest art destroyer. You see, when Stefan Brettweiser was arrested, His girlfriend, who was the lookout, they didn't know who she was, she left. She went home. And she told his mother what had happened, that he had been arrested. And his mother was greatly concerned because she knew all this artwork that he kept in his home. She knew all these paintings and all these sculptures and all these things that he had acquired over the years. And she didn't want her son to get in trouble, so she went to his house. And because it took the police a while to get this together and to piece together who this was and what he had done, and because he had done it in so many countries, they had to get all the right warrants and all the international things, that they were delayed in going to check out his house to see what was there. But his mother wasn't delayed. She went directly there. She began to take those artworks. She folded up the canvases. And she stuck them in the garbage disposal and flipped the switch. And those paintings were destroyed. Those artworks were shattered. And before they could get there, she had destroyed so many of these great pieces of art. They don't think she knew what they were worth. They weren't worth the hundreds of millions of dollars, but they were valuable. They weren't the prize of the museum, but they were worthy of display. And now they were fishing the remains out of the sewer to try to see if they could piece together what was left. But as one police official said, never have so many old masters been destroyed at the same time. Works of art that had survived world wars. Works of art that had survived bombings and fires. All literally were sent down the drain, not realizing their true value. When I told you this story, you may be thinking of, well, maybe he's trying to compare us to the art thief. Or maybe he's trying to compare us to the museum owners who weren't watching out like they were supposed to. But you know who you are in this story? You are the art. You are that valuable thing that the Master has created. Because we were created in His image. We are His workmanship. And God has created us, and God has set us apart, and God has hung us in His gallery and said, this is something of value. When Jesus talks about us and our worries, what does He say? He said, consider the lilies of the field, consider the birds of the air. Why? Because you're more valuable than they. Matthew chapter 6, verse 29. You're more important than those things. Solomon in all his splendor wasn't like that. You are valuable. But maybe we're not protecting ourselves. Maybe we're so busy on everything else that we're letting the thief come and take what he shouldn't. Because we are priceless to God. You know, it's funny in the art world how a painting becomes a masterpiece, how it becomes priceless. You know, the Mona Lisa is probably the most famous painting in the world, right? People will go, fly over to Paris, go to the Louvre to see the Mona Lisa. It's this tiny little thing. But do you know the Mona Lisa was not considered to be a priceless work of art until the late 20s when it was actually stolen? It actually got stolen and it was eventually recovered. And all the blurbs about it, all the news media about it, all this thought of, oh, this priceless art was stolen is what made people realize how valuable it was. And now it's considered this ultimate artwork that's protected. Right? It's so valuable. Why did people realize that? Because they almost lost it. They realized how close they came to losing it. And then, oh man, it became priceless. Are we not in the same scenario? We don't realize how valuable we are. We don't realize how important we are. And we allow ourselves to be thought of and taken away when the thief comes because we're not watching out to protect it. Are we distracted from things? Are we distracted from good things? Are we allowing our hurts and our wants, the troubles of life, all those other things to keep us from seeing what we have. What's funny is, why did Stefan Brettweiser steal art? Because he liked art. He loved art. He wanted art. But because of his actions, he ended up destroying art. How many things are we missing out on because of sin? Because of those little temptations, because of those careless words, because of those inactions. They're actually destroying the things that we know are valuable, that we truly love, our family, our friends, our church. Because we're not watching out for those little things that can do the most damage. Are we destroying what's valuable to cover our sin? That's why his mom destroyed all that artwork. It's not that she hated artwork. It's not that she was evil. She just thought she was protecting her son. But in trying to cover up, she did way more damage. How many good things are destroyed because of petty sin? How many good things are broken because we've allowed a little bit of jealousy, a little bit of envy, a little bit of hate to come in and ruin what is truly valuable? Jesus said in John chapter 10, verse 10, "The thief comes to kill and destroy and to steal, but I have come that they may have life and they may have it abundantly." The devil is like a lion. He's seeking to destroy. He's waiting and watching for when our back is turned, when our eyes are not on the prize, when we are distracted by all these other things. And he can come in and he can cut us out, take us away, and tear us up. But Jesus came that we may have life and we may have it more abundantly. Too many people in our world have the mistaken notion of thinking that what Satan is keeping from us is the thing that we really want. And what God's having us to do is the thing that we really don't want to do. But it couldn't be more opposite. Because the things that Satan is selling are the things that bring destruction and ruin. And the covering up of sin and the falling into the temptation of sin, it brings us nothing but death and destruction. But when we follow God, when we seek His will, we'll have life, a life better than we ever thought. Don't let the Master's work be ruined because we didn't take temptation seriously. Don't let the masterpiece that God has created in your life be destroyed because we didn't watch out for the thief. Don't let it be destroyed because we thought the thief was going to come in a big spectacular way and forgot to watch out that he just may walk in the door and take from us because we're not being on guard against the very thing that could destroy us. Don't let your life be ruined. God has a protection plan for you and your soul. He has a way to make sure that you can be free from the devil and his plan. Today I ask you, have you listened to what God has told you to do? Being on guard is making sure that you're ready. Being on guard for those people when the armies were coming over the hill was to know to flee Jerusalem, to run, to get out. Why? Because God had told them what was coming. God tells us what is coming. A judgment's coming. Have we done the things that we need to do in order to be prepared? Have we believed the one who has sent us? Have we heeded his message? A message that tells us to be with Jesus, to turn from our sin because that sin is what's destroying us, to confess him as Lord, to have our sins washed away in baptism, to live a life that's pleasing to him. Because we are his workmanship created for good works. Are we living in a way that we recognize the value that he's given us? Are we allowing ourselves to set unguarded, unaware, until Satan comes and takes it away? Because we don't know the day or the hour when Jesus will come back, but we can know what we're doing on that time. Are we doing his will? And today, if you're not doing his will, Don't wait another moment. Today, if you're subject to the invitation, today, if you need to give your life to Christ, today, if you need to come back to Him, don't wait a moment longer. Take advantage of the opportunity that